Hi all, I'm Cullen Haynes and welcome back to Live with Cullen Haynes Ledger Legends episode 14. And my next guest is an absolute behemoth in the property space, former accountant, got into investing when he was just 22 years old and worked for one of the big four, Deloitte, and retired, get this, because of his investments and shrewd cunning by age 31, and has been helping others do the same in the property world, and founder and CEO of Your Empire Property Buyers Agents. And now I won't really reveal his true age because he looks a lot younger than he is, but he's been doing this for a number of years now. And you must get one of his best-selling books, Your Effortless Empire. I actually got this back in 2008, 2009, and it's serendipitous that we actually got connected together by John Sermon, one of my dear friends. So without further ado, can you please make very welcome the one, the only, Mr. Chris Gray. How are you, sir?
Wonderful. You got one of those original books. You've got to keep that nice and neat. It'll be worth millions at some point in time.
I know. I'm going to have to get you to sign it, my friend. I'm going to have to get you to sign it. But really appreciate you coming on the show. And very timely, we're about to have, this is live, by the way, everyone. Chris is very kindly joining us Wednesday, 6th of August at 5:15. So if you're watching on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitch, X, please put your questions in the comments. We will do our best to get to them. But what's happening in your world right now, Chris? Because you must be getting so many people coming to you saying, is now the right time, basically?
Look, they've pretty much said that for 30 years. And they say, is it the right time and where should I be investing? And the great thing, the reason I'm so time rich, and there's not many people that say they're time rich versus time poor, is because ultimately I think most of these things never change. So I wrote that book in 2008. So that's 17 years ago. Literally nothing has changed. The only thing we've changed in the book is the average price of property. So in those days, the examples were 500 grand. Then we rewrote it about, say, 2015. The only thing we changed was the examples to $1 million. Now we should really put the examples at, say, 1.8 to 2 million as an average kind of two-bedder in the eastern suburbs. But it just makes the numbers easy. We keep it at $1 million. So, but that's the reality, is properties just continue to go, especially in the blue chip areas, nice and consistent, decade to decade.
Absolutely. And look, it's so telling that is the case, right? Especially with obviously we're in a rate, very much a rate rising market over the last 2 or 3 years. And it's nice that it's starting to go down. Would you say that, anytime it's time in the market rather than trying to time the market itself?
100%. And the more people try and make money quicker, quite often the quicker that they stuff it up and they take undue risks. You don't need to. So one of the best stories I had was I was at Deloitte. So I was earning 80 grand a year in kind of 2000, 2002, which was 60 grand after tax. The same time the property market was kicking off, I had 6 properties. They're all going up by 100 grand a year. So I was making 600 grand a year from property. And when I explained to the partners what I did, because I actually tried to salary sacrifice a Ferrari, and they worked out the FBT was more than my wages, and they couldn't work out how I could afford a Ferrari, and they couldn't because I was so low in the company. And I basically explained, like we're explaining now, what I used to invest in. And their classic answer is, Chris, if it was that easy, everyone would do it. And my answer to that now is no, it's too simple for most clever people, because you're dealing with billions of dollars, multinational companies, you're looking at arbitrage and ways to kind of make your money. It's not that hard in property. You just need to buy. So I'm not cleverer than anyone else. The main difference between me and most other people is I just went and did it. And like McDonald's, I kept repeating. So I bought at 22, then at 24, moved to Australia at 27, bought another one, 3, 4, 5, 6, and just kept going. And you don't need hundreds and hundreds of properties like you read on socials and in the books, especially if you're buying decent property, $1 or $2 million properties in Bondi's or Manly's or Balmain. You only need a few and it can change your life.
No, I'm endeared by what you're saying there, Chris. And you've had one heck of a journey from spreadsheets to property portfolios. If you had to sum up your life so far using just film titles, how do you reckon you do that? We've obviously called this episode Buy Hard, so it might be a nice little ring in there.
Yeah, I think the classic thing with, a bit of my look is probably Die Hard with a spreadsheet type thing, that it is actually, it's not about property, it's about spreadsheets, and it's the numbers. And the great thing about being an accountant is I've got no emotion. There's no emotion about what I do. It's literally spreadsheets.
No, and would you say that's one of your most important skills, is that you do have no emotion? And maybe that's the number one mistake people make, is they get too emotionally invested in these things.
It is. And look, it is an emotional thing. We're dealing with millions of dollars, especially if you're investing in Sydney or somewhere like that. So there's a lot of money involved. We've all been brought up by our parents or our grandparents to avoid debt, to pay off debt. Debt's a bad thing. And look, it can be if you don't manage it properly. But ultimately, it is about leverage if you can, because there's a limited amount of hours in the day, but there's no limit to how much property you can control effectively. And so, look, when I got married, in the back of the book, there's a picture of my son there when he was about 6 months old or something like that, bald head just like mine. When I got married, I had to learn emotion. Apparently, as part of being a family and father and the rest of it, you need to learn some emotion. So I'm learning that kind of stuff. But when it comes to investing, having no emotion is the best thing in the world.
No, I'm picking up what you're putting down, and correct me if these figures are incorrect, but you, from my understanding, you built your first $3.5 million property portfolio in under 9 years, starting with just 35,000. If that's correct, what was the mindset that you needed to make that possible? Because as you said, you don't need the big capital that everyone thinks you do to be able to do this.
Yeah, it's actually laziness. And so a lot of people talk to me about being a high achiever. And I say, no, I'm actually really, really lazy. And that's the thing that got me started. Because at the age of 21, 22, I was earning £10,000 a year in the UK working for Kodak Finance as an accountant, which is, say, 20,000 Australian dollars. So not a lot of money. But basically what I worked, and there was no books in those days. There's no Rich Dad, Poor Dad or anything like that. No TV shows, no internet. But I basically looked to move out of home because my mum was giving me a midnight curfew. And I worked out that what I wanted to, the suburb and the place I wanted to live in, I couldn't afford. And so rather than just give up and say no, it's how do I afford it? So I started, rather than looking at 1-bedroom units, looking at 3 or 4 bedroom homes. And obviously a 3 or 4 bedroom home in a blue chip suburb is a lot of money. But then I worked out that if I could rent 2 rooms out to 2 mates, rents in those days was about 12%. Now they're about 4 or 5%. And so what I worked out is if I could rent 2 rooms, I could actually live for free. So a 3-bedroom house that was, say, £100,000 was cheaper than a 1-bedroom unit at 30 or 40, because sure, the mortgage was more, but if all the mortgage was paid, that made sense. And so I then pitched my dad to say, have I done the maths right here? And I actually don't want a handout, but I just need your help with the bank to persuade them to lend me 8 times my income so that my repayments are more than my salary. But having these 2 rents coming in, it makes financial sense. And that's the accounting skills I've got. So I'm not the best accountant. I failed tax 3 times in London, but I can do basic maths. And that's the thing.
Well, as you say in your book, many professionals work hard to just have one property, right, and manage those repayments. You show them how to own 10 or more. Why do you think so many people get stuck? And what's the first step you get them to change?
Yeah, a lot of it's just limiting beliefs, that a lot of people just can't believe that they can do it. And they look at people on TV, just like I did when I was younger. Or you look at a rich person. We had a American guy at our tennis club in the UK that drove a Porsche. And as a young teenager, you wouldn't really dare to speak to someone because he was a millionaire and he drove a Porsche, which was a big status symbol back in the kind of 80s and 90s and stuff like that. But the thing is, you see so many people now on socials, and look, a lot of it's fake on socials, but there are quite a lot of young people that don't necessarily come from the best backgrounds. Sometimes the tougher the background they had, it actually makes it easier because they don't want the life that their parents wanted. And so they might come from Mount Druitt or from a single parent family, 5 or 6 brothers and sisters, no money. And that's the motivation. So the main thing, and I was actually speaking to a guy from a gym before. He was trying to get me to sign up, and I'm just not motivated by that stuff. And he tried to take me down the health benefits and the fitness ones, and it just doesn't string with me. That's what people need. They need a reason to go and do it, because otherwise it's easy to do your 9 to 5, go home, watch TV, do nothing else. That's the easiest thing. And people make every excuse under the sun to not go and invest. It's not the right time. Trump could do something. There could be another war. Interest rates could still bounce. maybe the property market's going to go down. There's 101 different reasons, and they've been bantered around for hundreds of years.
Absolutely, probably even longer than that. We've already got people checking in. Hey guys, a quick hello to yourself. Steve McMenamin, an absolute legend in Melbourne, who follows your stuff, Chris. So thank you so much there, Steve. And if you are we are live at the moment. So if you've got any burning questions for Chris, please put them in. You're tuning in to Ledger Legends, episode 14 on Live with Cullen Haynes. And thank you for re-listening if you're tuning in on the podcast, wherever you get them. Now, you once said that your investments made you more money than your salary. And it was probably perplexing those partners from Deloitte back in the day. What held you back making that leap earlier, I wonder there, Chris?
Well, so my dad was a doctor, but he worked for the National Health Service, so basically government public hospitals. So he was definitely not into money. He had no money motivations. When he finally passed away from a heart attack, he had probably a 24-year-old Golf GTI that was worth £100 that the insurance company had written off, and he said, "Oh no, I can still fix it and keep it running." So I never had the motivations from him in terms of wealth. And I was very much brought up in a job for life thing. So I became an accountant, obviously wasn't clever enough to be a doctor and hated blood, but I did the next best thing, became an accountant. But what I did at Deloitte was I was in a interim CFO business where we used to put CFOs into our clients on a temporary basis. I had to interview 10 a week. So over 2 years, 50 weeks, 100 weeks, that's 1,000 people. So I got to know 1,000 people of how their careers had run for successful people. And what I found was most of them weren't financially successful. Quite often they'd work 60, 70, 80 hours a week. Quite often they might have been separated. They were then struggling to compete with 30 or 40-year-old English and Irish backpackers that they were trying to pitch to the companies. "Oh, I'm a CFO and you can get me half price." But the companies didn't want that. They wanted the 20 or 30-year-olds that they could mold and they could get for 30 or 40 bucks an hour. And so that's what I thought. I thought the salary, even though I hadn't read Robert Kiyosaki and all of these amazing books that we have now, I just thought the people at the top haven't got what I wanted. And when that property market suddenly started increasing, and would you remember the days of the good old low doc loans back in the early 2000s?
I remember.
Where you could
absolutely
tick a box to say, I can afford the repayments. So my properties were going up 600 grand a year. I could tick a box and I could get $480,000 in cash in my bank account when I only earned 60 from working. And I was clever enough. I wasn't a great accountant, but I was clever enough to realize $480,000 for doing nothing and signing a few forms is a lot easier than turning up to work 20 or 30 hours a week at Deloitte for 48 weeks of the year. And that's when I decided to leave full-time work.
No, and we've got a lot of obviously accountants tuning into the show, and similar trajectory in law. It's very stratified like that. As a former accountant, like what part of the training still gives you an edge in the property world? Like any skills you didn't expect to use so much that you do now?
Look, I still keep going back to my spreadsheets. And I deal with people all the time. But the difference is quite often we get clients, like we do discovery calls with clients. We give them a half an hour and have a good chat with them and talk about what strategies they're thinking about. Quite often they send over their spreadsheets and they're so complicated. They're pages and pages long. And you can't really see what the big picture is with all that detail. Whereas I use a very similar spreadsheet to what's in my book, literally 4 or 5 numbers, and then maybe kind of 10 years spread out. And it's having the numbers as simple as that, literally having the rental income coming in, the mortgage going out, whatever the expenses are, and knowing all those percentages and how those change to then know your net position. I don't even take into account negative gearing. I think of that as a bonus. If labor comes in or someone takes it out, you can't suddenly change your strategy because you're not getting the tax back. So assume it's a bonus. So I don't even worry about that stuff, where there's other people working down to the dollars and cents to see if they can afford it. But if interest rates suddenly go up 40% or 4%, that's 40 grand on a $1 million mortgage. And so that blows all your other numbers out the way. So it's mainly the mortgage is the big number. But again, what we do is we work out in the book is what is your break even. So say you get 4.5% rent, maybe 1.5% of expenses, you're getting a net, say 3% rent, less the mortgage, you're losing 3% then, 2% after tax. So my bet is Do I believe property will rise in the blue chip suburbs by more than 2 or 3% a year from decade to decade? Not this year, next year, over the next decade. And have I got enough cash to hold on until it does that? And that's basically the bet I make. And it's forced saving, you would know, is the best saving you can ever do. You're never going to save 40 grand a year or 100 grand a year or 500 grand a year. But if your mortgage is that amount of money and you don't want to default, you'll beg, borrow, or steal, or work twice as hard to make sure you can make those mortgage repayments. And that's probably the other secret to my success is I've been in debt since I was 22, and that forced saving has forced me to get off my backside and go and work when I needed to. And then when it's all positive cash flow and I can be fat and lazy and hang down the beach or something like that. So you go through ups and downs just like the economy.
Of course, of course. And, speaking of those two high income professions, accounting and law, what is the one mistake you see the time poor professionals like these do when it comes to buying property?
I think the biggest thing is they think that their wages or their next bonus or their next increase in wages is going to change their life. And again, mortgage brokers say it all the time is people spend it. First of all, you lose half of it in tax. And your lifestyle adjusts. You need a holiday. You need whatever else.
You need it. It goes up. Lifestyle creep.
Yeah. My old boss, who became a client as well, she was in her early 40s. She was earning maybe 300 grand a year, and she still couldn't afford to get in the Sydney market because her expenses had effectively got up to the same level. Yeah.
No, good point.
And so that's the thing is the earlier you can start before you get those things of flying business and having $1,000 handbag or probably a 5 or 10 grand handbag these days. Or
the Birkin bags. Come on, Birkin baby.
Yeah. Whatever the watch is or something like that is, you can get those rewards afterwards, but you need to invest first. That's the thing. It's like car loans. You get a car loan first and the mortgage companies hate it. You go and get yourself a mortgage and then the car companies love it after that. So you've got to do things in the right order.
Yeah, good point, actually. Good point. And it's the trap that most people fall into is they don't realize that, the credit cards, the car loans, even HEX to a certain extent, it all works against you when it comes to your home loan, especially when you're earning the upper echelons as well. So good points and cogent insights there, Chris. Switching gears a little bit, you're not just an investor. You've also built a cracking business around it. What does it take to be the top of your game as either a founder or a leader? Because we've obviously got lawyers, accountants, and entrepreneurs and finance professionals tuning in. What would you say it takes to be at the top of your game or the top of your field?
So look, if you really want to be the best lawyer, the best accountant, or the best buyer's agent, then obviously you've got to give up your whole life to try and get there. It's very, very hard. So I never aspired to have the biggest career. So I was on Sky News for 10 years. We did 500 shows. We did some on kind of Channel 10, Channel 9. I was never the best TV presenter, but I didn't want to be. I was never the best accountant, and I didn't want to be. I didn't want to be the best buyer's agent because ultimately 99.9% of my money comes from having my own properties. So I've got around, say, 20, 25 million of property. I assume it goes up roughly 7% a year. So it roughly goes up $1.5–2 million a year. I don't pay tax on that unless I sell it. Now, I run a business, but again, is to earn a couple of $1 million after tax in your business, you need a pretty big business to go and do that, and you give up your life. And so I got to a stage that even early on is what I go into business for is, first of all, I love it. So hopefully you can see the passion in my face. I can be like this at midnight if I've been drinking for 10 hours and someone suddenly bumps into me and say, "Oh, you're Chris Gray, can I ask you a question about property?" I still love it. My team hates it, but I still love doing that at wherever the weekends, because ultimately every day is the same to me now. I don't have a working week and a weekend. Every day is the same. And so I love it. But really I guess the reason for being in business is part of it is you need something to do. You go and retire at 31. There's not many other 31-year-olds hanging around. So you need to still do something every day. Basically, the business gives me the income to give me the serviceability through the mortgage brokers to get the loans that then finances the property and helps me pull equity out and either keep repeating, or at my stage in life, it's more taking money off the table and actually enjoying life.
Well, at the end of the day, I'm glad you said that, because as much as, It's that Grant Cardone hustle and grind. You got to work hard. You don't want to work yourself into an early grave because stress is a real big thing. Burnout's a big thing, as you know. So the whole point, in my mind, I saw a nice LinkedIn article, is obviously leaving that legacy and also leaving that time for yourself, because there's no point working so hard that you don't get to see the fruits of that, right?
So there's a really good book I came across, and I'm not a big book reader, but I went through a stage of reading a lot of books. Now I just read a few, and it's a book called oh God, it's gone out of my mind now. We might have to talk about something else, and it'll come back.
That's all right. We'll come.
No, I've got it. Die with Zero. It's a really, really cool book, and it's almost going to be as big as like a Robert Kiyosaki thing in a way. And what it really talks about is a lot of people keep trying to build wealth all the time. And it's like the old thing with our parents is you retire at 65, you get the gold watch and you do the world tour. But at 65, you've been working to the bone. A lot of them were manual labors then. And you haven't got the energy to go and bungee jump and to go and windsurf and water ski and do all of those things at the age of 65 or 70. And so the whole thing is about you need to do that stuff when you're young. When you've got young kids, you want to play with your kids. You don't want to be doing 80 or 100 hours a week when you've got young kids, because by the time you're then at home, your kids have left home. They don't know their parents, and they've left home and you don't get them back. Mine are 15 and 17. It's hard to trap them in a car or a plane with you because they want to hang out with their mates. They want to hang around other fun people, not with their parents. And so also you don't need that much money. And you don't need lots of money in your 70s and 80s because you're not doing that much stuff. And so it's all about trying to work it out now to live more of your life, but obviously saving enough for tomorrow that you've got that perfect balance.
I love that. If you're just tuning in to Ledger Legends, episode 14, we're here with Chris Gray from Your Empire Property Buyers Agents, former accountant, and he just recommended Die with Zero, a great book, Getting All You Can from Your Money and Your Life by Bill Perkins. I'm endeared by what you're saying in that message of that book, because I was told very earlier on, I was probably right by the time when I was reading your book as well, is when you're really young, you have a lot of time, but you have no money. And then when you're kind of getting into the, like kind of my age, 36, 37, you got some money, but you don't have a lot of time because you're working, right? And then when you get to the end of your life, you've got all this money, but you don't have a lot of time. So it's like, what are you going to do with the time that you're given? So,
and again, it's not so much the time, it's also your body to be able to physically do a lot of these things. So my wife and I in COVID, we went on a boat called True North, which is absolutely amazing. It's got a helicopter on the back. It's in the Kimberleys. It cost a fortune. It's like 45, 50 grand for a week. So it's a lot of money.
Wow.
Most of the people that can afford that are 70 and 80-year-olds. And each day you go off on a tinny and you go and kind of go for crabs and stuff like that. You're no swimming because of all the crocodiles. And then you get up on a chopper and they take you to these pools where you kind of then go for a swim, kind of where the crocs can't go. But again, when you're 70 or 80, the ability for a lot of people to get on and off the chopper or the boats, they can't do it. Whereas to do that in your 50s or your late 40s, that's the time to do it. But most people can't afford those kind of things. And this is what it's about. So I literally worked twice as hard in my 20s so that my 30s and onwards, I could then have more of a relaxed kind of lifestyle.
No, like, and I want to talk about that because your book is called The Effortless Empire, right? But property isn't always effortless. So what's the hardest lesson you've had to learn along the way to make it that effortless empire?
Well, again, I was pretty lucky because I knew I wasn't the cleverest person. So again, in my 20s, when I first bought this property at 22, 3-bedroom house, I had 2 mates move in, and we had a cleaner come in. She only cost £3.50 an hour. So it's £10.50 a week for 3 hours, so roughly $20. But it was a lot of money in those days. And my mum said, how can you afford to have a cleaner in your house when you're 22? And I said, well, look at my flatmates. Do you really want to be cleaning the bathroom after those guys have been for a curry and been out drinking and done whatever else?
A Vindaloo, you don't want to do that, no.
Exactly. But the whole thing was, and again, another good book was obviously Tim Ferriss.
Yes.
And again, the
4-hour work week, right? Or Tools with Titans and things like that.
And again, the big thing that he says is if you're earning $50 an hour effectively, which would be $100,000 salary, assuming you would get paid for doing an extra couple of hours at work, which I know most people don't, but it's more the thought process. If you can delegate to someone for under $50 an hour, you're better off doing an extra hour's work and delegating 2 hours to them at $25. So I've delegated everything in my life, like so much so that I do very, very little, which for my wife is obviously very annoying. But I just think, what's the point doing a dishwasher or cleaning the car or something like that, which is maybe a $25 or a $40 an hour job, if I could concentrate on buying one more property that maybe goes up 50 grand a year, which makes me another $1,000 a week.
That's a very good point. It's all about you don't get paid based on the hour. It's the effort and value you bring to the hour. That's an old Jim Rohn thing, and I absolutely love that. Otherwise, they'd be paying you if you're at McDonald's multi-millions if you were bringing in more business and things like that. So a good point. What are you bringing to that hour? Look, after a long, frustrating day, how do you like to unwind, would you say, Chris? Is it yoga? Is it Top Gear reruns? Is it takeaway? What are you doing there?
Well, I'm English, and so the English are reasonably renowned for enjoying the pub and stuff like that. So I do enjoy a nice afternoon in the pub or out on the boat, having a few beers with some mates. I'm quite a networker. Both my parents and my wife's parents were very, very active and very social. So I think before we had kids, we were out 7 nights a week. Now we're kind of 5 or 6 or so. So generally active. But look, I love socializing. I love going out there. But look, I'm a prawn pizza or chicken schnitzel kind of guy. I'm not necessarily 5-star dining. We do that with work a tiny bit, but I'm pretty down to earth. I generally only drink beer and not craft beer, like a Peroni or a Asahi or something like that. So I'm not drinking $1,000 bottles of wine or bottles of whiskey. I'm pretty down to earth. And again, my cars, I got into kind of Porsche, then Ferrari, and then Lamborghini in my kind of 20s and 30s. Whereas now my latest purchase was a tuk-tuk 2 months ago that cost me $10,000. And yeah, I've got a tank that I drive around Sydney that a lot of people see me in that costs only $60,000. But when you live around,
I've got to see these photos, Chris.
And everyone's got like $1 million Lamborghini or Ferrari or Pagani or whatever it is, you can't compete. You're never going to have the best car or the best boat in the harbour. But when you turn up in a tuk-tuk or a tank, there's not many people that compete with that.
It's a purple cow. And in a field of cows, you're always going to notice the purple ones. You dare to be different. But talking on that, let's settle this. You know, we've obviously called this episode Buy Hard for a certain reason. How often do you get told you either look like Bruce Willis or Gary Sweet? And do you just lean into it?
Yeah, look, you can't fight it. So I used to get Gary Sweet a lot about 10 or 15 years ago. So he was the guy. Not a lot of people would necessarily know him these days. Yeah,
no.
He's been on TV
he's in
for
a few things. He's floating around.
I think House Husbands, but he was always very well known for the cop shows. And I actually been watching the reruns of Stingers, and he was on that, which I think is 90s or something like that. He was very big in that. He was very suave and kind of a lot skinnier than me. But over in Japan, I go to Asia quite a bit. In Japan, I get Bruce Willis a lot, and I do post for the photos with the young fans and take a photo and give them a thumbs up or give them the V sign and go along with it.
There's Bruce Willis. Oh my God, that'd be amazing. Has it ever helped? Let me ask you this: has it ever helped in a negotiation or saying "yippee-ki-yay, that's below market value"? Have you ever done anything like that?
Yeah, I don't think I've gone that far, but look, it definitely brings a smile to people, and I think that's the thing with negotiation. So, with all the property deals, you don't have to go and screw people and rip off old grannies to go and make your money in property.
Oh,
we typically buy properties on a valuation. We get completely independent valuations. Typically, we never go to auction. So we go and buy a property for $1 million, which a bank value, as you know, is conservative, says it's worth $1 million. We know at auction under competition that might sell for 1.1, maybe even 1.2 million. We're dealing with agents and vendors that are motivated. They want to deal with us because we're straight talkers. We don't lie. We don't cheat. We play a very, very straight game. And that generally gets us more business and more deals done than the people that are trying to screw people over. Because if we say, we'll get the valuation done, it comes in $1 million, we'll pay you $1 million, we'll be at your office at 5 o'clock tonight or 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, we'll be there half an hour before, versus someone that turns up late is then trying to haggle more and more money. And that's the thing, is people like dealing with nice people. Again, I deal with brokers, accountants, financial planners all the time, and it's not about what they charge. It's about just getting a deal done and for everyone to win. If someone's not winning, it's not a great deal.
No, good point. Good point. And one thing you said about the valuation, would you agree that you make your money on when you buy rather than when you sell?
Yeah. So look, I'm generally a fan of never selling, but look, there are sometimes reasons to sell, and I actually sold one about 6 months ago that I wanted to offload. But yes, I think the biggest thing is you make money by doing something. So if you never buy that property, you're never going to make any money.
Good
And so
point.
yes, you want to buy, but on the converse side, so many people say, I want to get a bargain. And say the property price now is $1 million and the market's moving at 10% a year. At the end of the year or 2 years later, they're still trying to find that bargain. And in the good suburbs, you don't get a bargain. A bargain is buying it for $1 million for valuation price and not paying 1.1 or 1.2 at auction. So you could say that's a 10 or 20% discount, or you could say it's valuation. It's whatever you are. I'm an accountant, so I'm conservative. I say it's valuation.
Correct.
That's the bargain. If you can buy in a heated market on valuation in a blue chip property that's like a block of 12, got no lifts, gyms, pools, it's got parking, it's close to the beach or whatever the center of the suburb is, that's a winner. It ticks the box and you paid the right price and you bought it, versus the bargain or the one that's waiting to get rezoned or a renovation job. It very rarely happens.
No, good point. Good point. And if you can
And
share,
I don't know about gyms.
Yeah,
I don't know about gyms, but what I've heard is 80% is turning up. I'm not very good at turning up, but if I did turn up, even if I didn't do a lot, I'm sure I'll be a hell of a lot healthier than I am today.
Absolutely, absolutely. And shout out to Soma Where I Go and Locker Room, who probably tried to reach out and get you to join their gym as well.
I was actually speaking to Locker Room earlier on, and I said,
there you
look,
go.
I'm not
Lachlan
your
and the
average
team are legends there. Yeah. I think they got a good shtick. The gym for founders and executives. I think it's pretty cool. It's got a
I've
good
never heard of it,
to
but again, it's the thing, and that's what someone recommended. So I said, look, it's not my kind of gig, but I'm willing to give it a go. So who knows?
Good point.
I might look different in 12 months.
Shout out to Lachlan and the team there at Locker Room. But any personal goals that you can share with us before we get to the end of the stream? So anyone got any questions, please do. But any personal goals beyond property, a new book, a Netflix special, a Bruce Willis biopic, maybe? What are you working on, Chris?
So look, my ideal thing is to have no bucket list.
Okay.
And the reason I say that, and I'm not trying to get dark here or anything, is I assume I'm going to die tomorrow and I might not be around. Most people regret not being able to do stuff, whereas I've always been a doer. And so one of the, I guess some of the recent things is I get these wacky ideas like buying tanks or buying tuk-tuks or something like that. People give me a crazy idea and I go and do it. A couple of years ago in COVID, then I learned to drive a road train. So I went out to Western Sydney. I had to do a license and a medical to get my, I think, HR license, and come back a year later to then drive 2 trucks and then 3 trucks. And so for fun, rather than go around the racetrack in a Lamborghini, I go to Western Sydney and I drive road trains just for fun and hang out at truck stops and have lunch with the truckers. And I still have an instructor that lends me the car and he supervises me, and he thinks I'm absolutely crazy. I turn up in a 1948 Rolls Royce from the eastern suburbs and I want to drive trucks. So I'm just looking for my next idea of something stupid to go and do.
I love that stoic mindset of I'm assuming I'm going to die tomorrow, because it's very much aligned with what Ryan Holiday talks about in his book, the Daily Stoic and whatnot. It's all about memento mori, that general in ancient Rome who came in glorious, right? And then someone was paid to whisper in his ear, remember, one day you're just mortal and you're not going to be here. And I think if people knew and they lived their life that they were going to go die tomorrow, they probably changed the way they acted in this life, which is why when I leave the house, I make sure I kiss my kids and say I love you, because you never know what is going to happen and you never want to leave anything in anger and whatnot. So I love that kind of mindset. I don't find it morbid at all. I find it quite cathartic that you lead your life like that, Chris. It's amazing.
So I've had a couple of near-death experiences, and on the first one, and both of them turned out to be nothing anyway. But the first one, the only regret I had is I actually bought about 14 cars in COVID. And when I went into the hospital and I said to my wife, the only regret I've got is I haven't built all these cars that I wanted to build. And that's my only regret. I'm never going to see them. Whereas all the other stuff I've done. And then when I had the next episode, which was about 2 years ago, and I basically got pancreatitis and came off a plane from Asia. Within 2 hours, I was in emergency at up at the Cross, and my kind of belly ballooned out, and it was like a hippo was sitting, or a sumo wrestler was crushing you, and I really thought I was going to die. And that was the first time I actually didn't have any regrets. And so when my wife and kids came to see me, not so much in front of the kids, but in front of my wife, I actually said, look, if this was the time, I'm actually completely comfortable. I'm glad I've got great kids. Then 95% that they're great humans and they're living a good life. I'm happy with what I've done with you, and we've traveled and we've done our stuff. And as much as I want to carry on living, I'd be okay with it.
Amazing. It's very rare that you hear someone saying they've done everything they want, because usually it's the ghosts of the regrets of the things they haven't done when they get to that point. So you're very lucky in that respect, and it's the way you live your life, Chris. Look, you've seen,
and I'm not saying that I've done everything. So that's the thing. So I don't live in $100 million home. I don't fly private jets and stuff like that. I don't have rich and famous friends, but I don't need that. Part of it's being content with what you've got, because otherwise you're never going to be content.
When's enough, Chris? When is enough enough?
And if you believe all this Instagram rubbish all the time, and the new generation, the kids' generation, that's the hard thing. It's not a real life. Most wealthy people don't live a life like that, and they don't want to.
No. Like, some people show me, these videos of these young kids in the private jet, and I say, don't you know you can buy a private jet and hire it for 5 minutes to do those videos? Don't believe all that stuff.
It's like going to Versace up at the Gold Coast. The amount of people that are just posing there, they're not even staying in the hotel. And obviously the hotel loves it because it's giving them lots of free advertising. But
PR,
again, it's
right?
all the wannabes, and they're just hanging out outside pretending that they've turned up in a Rolls Royce.
Oh my goodness. Nonetheless, please don't fake it till you make it, people. You've seen the property landscape change and evolve over the last 2 decades. And you've already made this comment that it's probably the same. Where do you see it heading in the next 10 years, say?
Look, there's obviously 101 or 1,001 different property markets around Australia. And there's obviously gurus that say, oh, you should be in Perth now, or you should be here or there. I've been slow and steady wins the race. I've always thought about investing in the good suburbs because there's no limit to what someone can pay. So you go and look rurally, and I do lots of car rallies rurally, and you see all of these shops closing down. You see the kids with nothing to do and kind of high on drugs and stuff, and lots of vacant land. Yes. I can't see how properties are going to double from 300 to 600 to 1.2. Who's moving there? And there's no lack of supply. Probably the biggest thing I learned from Sky News, we did 500 interviews with kind of mortgage brokers, banks, valuers, RP data, all of those kind of really clever guys. Yes. And the best thing I got was from a guy called John Edwards from Residex, who whole life predicted capital growth. And he said, Chris, the biggest thing is schoolboy economics. If there's no more supply and there's lots of demand, property prices go up. So the classic Bondi, and it's not just Bondi, but these kind of areas, is if there's no more units there, because there's 3-story height limits, even if they change the zoning, you can't put another 10,000 apartments into Bondi.
You can't build on that.
It's pretty much capped. If there's people living in 10, 20 or $30 million apartments, they can afford for 1 million to double to 2 and 2 to 4 and 4 to 8. I'm going to be giving my kids, they're not in the background so they can't hear, they will probably be getting deposits and a help into the property market like most of the other people in the eastern suburbs, the Lower North Shore and the inner west. And the equivalents in obviously Melbourne and Brisbane and our main capitals. That's the thing that's driving it. There is no more property. Not everyone wants to go much further out and live regionally or in Byron or in places like that. A lot of the money, even with work from home, is still going to be around our major capitals.
Yeah, absolutely. What advice would you give a young accountant or lawyer today who wants to create freedom through property?
Become an accountant, lose all your emotion, and just go and do it. That's the big thing. Even if you make the biggest mistake, it doesn't matter. Go and do something. Look, if you go and buy in a mining town, yes, you can lose all your money. But if you read a couple of books, read 10 books, a book a month for 10 months, that'll get you 80% of the knowledge you need to secure you from doing something stupid. And the best tip I ever had was get an independent valuation. And I actually got that tip from one of the biggest con artists in property that's ever been around Australia. So you can learn from the bad people too. He said, if you get an independent valuation, and we pay $660 for them, for a $1 or $2 million property, that almost guarantees you'll never overpay for it, because the valuers never, unless they're really dodgy, they're never going to overvalue a property. That's a really good gut check to make sure that you're not overpaying for a property.
Well said. And now, final question. I think that's my 2.5-year-old that's come home. When all is said and done, how would you like to be remembered one day there, Chris, professionally and personally, or both?
For me, professionally and business and personally, it all blends in. I love our clients. I'm happy to speak to anyone, and I only work with people I like. And lucky there's a lot of good people out there. I want to be known as the contrarian, the guy that pushed the limits, and maybe the guy that died with so much in debt that he couldn't repay the bank, but his wife and kids were still okay because they got paid out, and the rest of it is I want to be in debt for life in a way. I want to live a bigger life and have more fun than, I guess, the typical person, and to be on the scorecard to say, well, God says, well, Chris, you really played that one really, really hard, and you enjoyed it, and good on you. And hopefully the thousands of people that I've touched, we've got a boutique buyers agency. Not everyone's our client, but there's still thousands or tens of thousands of people that I've changed the mindset of. And this is what it is. Whether you're buying a $1 million in Bondi or a 50 grand in the middle of nowhere, 80% of property investing is all about your mindset. We all think very, very similarly. And this is why working with mortgage brokers like yourself and accountants and financial planners, we all think a certain way versus going into a bank and they say, buy a home and pay it off over 25 years. So it's having that mindset of abundance, reading the books. There is a better life. No matter what you've gone through in the past, it's not your parents' fault. You've just got to accept it, move on in life, and you can really turn your life around no matter who you are.
I think there's so many gems in this episode. I don't know how we're going to cut this up and put it out there. But my final bonus question, I'm a Back to the Future fan. If you could go back and give yourself advice at any age, what age would you go back and give yourself advice in the DeLorean? And what would that advice be?
Look, I think it's the film Sliding Doors. I think you can't change anything, I think. Because if you did, you never know where you're going to end up. And look, I'm not perfect. I still work. I still have stresses because I kind of push the limits with finances at times. But I'm pretty happy with what I do. And so ultimately, I wouldn't change anything. So I guess what I'm doing for my kids. So my kids have got part-time jobs. They're 15 and 17. They're kind of basketball coaches and netball coaches. But I actually pay them, my youngest daughter, 15. I pay her $50 a book once a month to read a book. She's then got to write down every time she learns something from that book, and we have a 5 or 10 minute discussion at the end of it to talk through that to make sure she's understood it and can put it into practice. And that's the thing, because so many people wish they'd had that knowledge from an early age. They're $20 or $30 books. Anyone can go and do it. I'm sure there's still libraries these days that you can get a free book. But that's what I'm trying to teach my kids, that they're not going to get a massive handout. They've got to work it. They've got to be good people. If they're little rat bags, they're not going to be getting anything. And they know it's pretty clear. They know the life I've got. My wife chooses to work. She works kind of pretty hard, but she loves her job and she's a career person. But at least we've had the choice in our life, and our kids can see that we choose what we do. We don't get told by other people how to live our lives. And that's the biggest luxury. It's not the fancy houses, the cars, the boats, the holidays. It's choosing that you can do what you want with who you want, when you want, rather than being told by an employer to do it all the time.
A lovely note to end the stream. Thank you so much for coming on, Chris. It's been great. Where can people find you? Where are you hanging out the most? How can people get in touch with you if they'd like to?
So look, the easiest thing is just go to yourempire.com.au. You can download most of my materials all completely free. You can get the book on audio PDF. If you drop us an email and just mention Cullen's name, we'll send you a hard copy. Just give us your address and we'll send it off. And then obviously on the usual kind of LinkedIn, socials and all that kind of stuff. But if you want to see me, look for a weird car driving around the road in the eastern suburbs, the city or the North Shore. If it's a tank, a fire engine, a stretch limousine or a tuk-tuk, it's probably me. And I'm always open for a beer. So if you want some free advice, then you can book a call, or if you see me in a pub, buy me a beer, and I'll tell you as much as I can.
Fantastic, Chris. Definitely get on Chris's book, Your Effortless Empire. Thanks so much for coming on, Ledger Legends. It's been an absolute treat there, Chris. Thank you so much for everything you do.
It's a pleasure, and as you can see from the smile on my face and the glint in my eyes, I love property.
Absolutely. It shows. It really shows. Thank you so much, my friend. And if you are a Ledger legend, or you know someone who is and you want to be on the show, we come out every Wednesday on the Live with Cullen Haynes show, talking to law live legend in law, or an accounting legend in Ledger Legends, or general finance or otherwise in our Finance Live podcast. We come out on all your streaming platforms. And again, please get Chris's book, our guest for episode 14, Your Effortless Empire, and maybe pick up Cheeky, The Laws of LinkedIn, my new book that's out on Amazon as well. But all the best, everyone. Take care. Bye for now, and enjoy your Wednesday. Hey there, Cullen Haynes here, Australia's leading broker for lawyers on LinkedIn, and here's why I want to talk to you today about my book, my new book, The Laws of LinkedIn, 23 ways to find your tribe, build your following, and make 7 figures on LinkedIn. When I started this journey 7 years ago, when we built, myself and Andrew, my business partner, we built Legal Home Loans from the ground up, the pain point for us was we were at a standing start. No one knew who we were. We had no money, we had no contacts, and basically we had to find a way to make our voice heard, talk to our tribe, the legal community, and build trust. And the only thing we had at our disposal was LinkedIn, which was and still is free. There's over 1 billion people on LinkedIn, and I wish when I started, I had this book with me to guide me, because I basically distilled my 23 top leading hacks that we use to build our business to a 7+ figure, and I really want to get it out there and share it with you. So if you're back